Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the movie Eternals. And before I get into that, if I sound kind of weird and my pitch kind of goes all over the place, I'm kind of getting over a kind of sickness that began kind of like last week. You could really kind of see it in like my Halloween Kills and anime review. So I just apologize. I'm kind of on the back end of some kind of allergy shit thing going on, and just to let you know about that. But overall, for this movie, I really enjoyed it and really think it's a good Marvel movie. I was kind of surprised hearing all the different kind of takes on what was going on with this movie and how it was like the worst Marvel movie. And I'm like, all right, let's kind of see. Now, granted, we have had over 20 Marvel movies, and they definitely follow the formulas, and the thing is, this one doesn't really break those formulas. Now, granted, there are other kind of problems with it, which I acknowledge and that they're there, but I overall thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it, and of any of the kind of newer slate ones, I definitely thought that this one had a kind of bigger chance of getting fucked up. Like, I recognized that, like, even though I bring up Black Widow a lot with this, and with, like, Marvel movies, that's, like, my bar for, like, the worst Marvel movie. Now, granted, I do know that there are other worse ones, like Thor Dark World and everything, but this doesn't have any of those that at least I noticed, like any kind of technical levels or whatnot. I thought overall that the story was pretty good, and that it was cool that we were getting into the deeper kind of lore mythology of the macro-versal level of the mythology and lore of what goes on with the Eternals and the Celestials and everything like that. Now, we don't get into the multiverse here, so I just want to let that be known. There are some weird kind of characters that are just here for teases, so we'll kind of have to see how that goes. But overall, I had a really fun time with this movie. I kind of really liked it, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm glad they were able to kind of get these characters nailed down and everything. But we will get into also, I do have problems with certain things that kind of occurred and went on with this. So, let's kind of get into it. We begin with pretty much not exactly a Star Wars scrawl, but a Star Wars crawl, but like we get like some text kind of like giving us a little bit of a lowdown of what's going on, of like even before the singularities, i.e. the Infinity Stones. That we got the Celestials bopping and hopping around the universe, making planets, galaxies, doing life, all that kind of stuff. And that they got the Eternals doing their own kind of mission led by Ajax. Well, Ajax. Sorry, I just used to like the Trojan pronunciation of Ajax. So when they're doing it throughout this movie, even though it's not wrong, it's just weird to kind of get used to Ajax. Well, they come to Earth at 5000 BC, so 7,000 years ago, give or take. And their whole kind of thing is to fight the deviants. And we're not exactly privy to exactly what their whole thing is with the deviants until we get through later on. But one of my main kind of criticisms that we get up front with the deviants is that, contrary to the comic books, they're more kind of standardized with not that much differentiation, barring some kind of like evolutionary things that kind of happen later on. So they kind of look like just monsters, whereas in the comics, some of them can be monstrous, but some of them have like humanoid forms and do kind of weirder, crazier kind of shit. But we see the Eternals pop in. We see some humans with sticks and like stones and stuff like that, fishing and all that. We see this one father-son kind of group. The father pretty much gets eaten by Deviant, but then we see the Eternals pop up and start using their powers. And they're almost kind of Justice League-like. We've got like Icarus doing Superman stuff with his I-beams, because they are able to utilize the cosmic power. And it's not a MacGuffin exactly, but it's like this just cosmic, ubiquitous kind of power source that higher level beings can like manipulate at will. So Icarus does it mainly for flight and I-beams. We get Mkari as our speedster. We get Kingo as kind of like our guns out kind of dude. Gilgamesh is kind of like a bruiser brawler, kind of knock her down. Phastos is able to manipulate technology, so like a technopath kind of dude. Thana can like make weapons at will and just beat fucking ass. And Cersei is able to manipulate and change matter, namely inanimate matter. So it's not like she could turn someone into a popsicle stick or a giraffe if they so choose. Those who have seen it, we get a whole kind of dialogue spiel about giraffes and all that. But, and Ajax is more centered on healing and all that. Now, mind you, even though they have these powers, they are still extremely durable, strong, are able to like kind of do stuff that us humans normally can't. So they're kind of like dealing with that. And I am going to kind of change it up. Normally within my reviews, I kind of go as sequentially as possible. However, I think it would just be easier to string together all the kind of past stuff that we get with the Eternals until we can get to the modern day, because even though I thought it was pretty well done in the movie, it's kind of easier to talk about it that way. And also we get the character, the Eternal of Droog, who's able to like mind control people. And out of all the casting throughout the movie, I think Droog was the only one that was miscast. Not that they are a terrible actor, not that their lines or anything that is given to them storyline-wise is horrible. He brings up a lot of interesting stuff. It's just I don't think he was the best choice to do this character. Not because he sucks, but just sometimes it's hard to understand him with his accent, which isn't really like something that I'm like really gonna knock him for. It's just like, okay, that accent's a little bit kind of strange for me to kind of hear everything going on with certain words that was going on, but also just the way he like holds himself and presents himself doesn't really fit to how Droog is presented in the comic books. Now, they have shifted around characterizations. Like, Gilgamesh is actually kind of chill in this, whereas in the comics, he actually is an Avenger and like fights against the Eternals a lot. There's all different kinds of politics that is present in the comics that they kind of had to like change around and do for here, which most of them kind of work out. I do like that they're more of a tighter family unit and they kind of switch kind of stuff going on. But we see them kind of dealing with humanity and everything. And the thing is, the trailers kind of misrepresent a certain point because they do help and like deal with humanity through certain points, mainly because of what the deviants are and what kind of threat they pose towards humans. It's not like they're exactly doing all these kind of things and like fucking up shit with humanity. They're mainly there as protectors and like interacting among them, doing kind of weird shit. Because we flip to like Babylon and see them kind of repulsing an attack with the deviants, which is done pretty cool. I really like seeing all these different kind of powers like utilized. It can get a little CGI heavy, mainly towards the end of the movie, but they do a good job of making sure that each character kind of like still looks the same and all their powers kind of like work out pretty well. So they're pretty much trying to figure out what's going on. We see them kind of doing their thing. The biggest kind of other issue I've got is that this has a lot of characters in it. And it's ensemble overload, alright? That's a big thing. However, they were able to give the characters their own arcs. Now granted, these are not deep arcs. There's a lot of stuff that this movie does at least present and bring questions of, but it doesn't go deep enough in certain respects to do it. You do actually get understandings of like Sprite and Vastus and Droog. Makkari, not as much. Icarus, Cersei, Ajax, Kingo. A lot of them you get to kind of understand why they do certain things as we go throughout the movie. So even though it's an ensemble, I don't really point out any character that is just like cardboard or just standing in the background doing willy-nilly or whatnot. It's actually kind of a testament to be like, hey, all of these are characters. Do we need a lot more with what's going on? Sure, yeah, but it's hard to juggle all of these characters. The main one that kind of works in when we get to the present is Dane Whitman, who I'm like, okay, You barely really do anything for him. He's kind of in the beginning when we're in the present day stuff, and then kind of at the end. But that's about it. I'm like, all right. And it sucks because I'm like, ooh, Kit Harington does a pretty good job. I'm like, all right, I want to see where this Black Knight fellow kind of goes. And it's like, yes, do that. Well, they're kind of tooling around. We see that Droog is trying to stop the humans inside from fighting one another, but Makari's like calls him out about it, being like, hey, we gotta let them figure out their stuff on their own, otherwise it's not gonna end well. You know what I mean? And I like bringing out that concept of, it's very Star Trek, because these guys are following as much of a prime directive as possible without trying to completely fuck up human development. Because we really see that with Phastos, who wants to give the fucking Babylonians a steam engine. And they gotta call him out on it. It's like, fine then, give him a plow. Why does that become important? Because he wants to help them learn in advance. We'll see as we get later on that there are repercussions of that kind of line of thinking. We also see Cersei kind of like helping people out, doing irrigation and all of that, just really falling in love with the humans, and also falling in love with Icarus. We do get our first sex scene between the two of them in like an MCU movie, and it's not the most horrible sex scene possible, but it's kind of bad in that cheesy kind of way where you're like, yeah, there's a sex scene, go on ahead. I mean, we get that the characters love each other, and that is communicated across, but it's like, yeah, alright, moving on. So we see them kind of like working out, getting in, actually married in another kind of ancient civilization as they're going around, popping off, trying to help everything going on. I know I'm kind of like skipping over certain things, but we see kind of little character interactions. We see like Sprite and Kingo. Sprite is using her ability to use illusions, and she's an important one because she's the only one that is pretty much child of age, and that becomes important because she stays like that forever until we get some other repercussions later on. But she's doing all these things about the stories. We actually get an explanation of the whole Icarus myth, that Sprite did that to kind of fuck with the Eternals' Icarus, and that influenced Kingo towards, in the future, going towards being a Bollywood star, which I'm like, huh, that's kind of interesting. And his like man valet, who is actually a pretty cool kind of character, just like recording shit and everything. But as they're kind of like acclimating themselves and pretty much fending off the deviants, we see that they get to like the 1500s, and they're at one of the Aztec? I think it's like Aztec with the conquistadors, Aztec Mayans, down in like Central America, and everything's kind of going crazy. Everybody's trying to kill each other, and they're able to take out the deviants, and that's kind of the end, and that's all done. And they're looking and like, look at them, they're just killing each other and everything. And we also get introduced to like this madness kind of thing that Thana has because of all the memories that she's got, and she starts fighting some of her fellow Eternals. This is important because of how long the Eternals are lived and how their memories kind of like weigh on and affect them, but also how that is done with the Celestials. Because Arishem, the judge, is their kind of prime dude who's like, you go and stop the deviants and all that shit from like fucking shit up. It's like, alright. Well, Ajax saw everything going on. It's like, alright, Droog is pissed off about all this. It's like, why are we protecting them when all this shit's going down? What? Aren't we supposed to do something? Aren't we supposed to help them? What's going on? And that's kind of interesting because Droog is usually more of a Loki-like character of like, I'm gonna do what I do because I'm a giant dickhead motherfucker. But here, he's actually presenting some very interesting philosophical arguments of, okay, we're here to do a certain thing, but if we just let this continue, it's going to get even worse. And we also get into more philosophical things of like fate and choice and free will and all that as we get in later on. But we see that Ajax decides to say, hey, you guys go live among the humans, see what's going on, do your own kind of stuff, and all that. And they do spread out. important blip that I'm going to get to is that, well, I didn't mean blip, is like 1945 in Hiroshima. We see that Fastos kind of like helped them out and is evidently linked to the atomic bomb, which is interesting because World War II is where Captain America popped into play as well. So who knows if Fastos kind of had any kind of hand in like maybe some of the technological advancements that allowed that to happen. But we see that he helped them and he's like, they don't deserve to be saved. Look at what they've done. And Ajak is heartbroken with him as well and tried to like console him, but he has lost faith in humanity. Now, that does kind of change kind of fast in the present day, and it's because of like one, pacing, because it's almost like a 3-hour movie, but also because we have to deal with everybody else as well. It's like, holy shit. But that's important to get our background stories too as we get into pretty much present day, and we see that Cersei is like a lecturer at the school. Her current boyfriend, Dane Whitman, is pretty much holding the ground until she could kind of get there. Of course, the kids go, ooh, ah, kind of shit. He kind of goes off. She's talking about apex predators, and that actually is an interesting kind of segue. It's not subtle about certain things, because we do know Icarus is myth, and that factors into certain things that go on. But here it's talking about, like, okay, an apex predator is someone that has no predators. So, okay, let's see how that kind of works out. And that does work out into certain explanations. Well, we're going through, we see that evidently Sprite is with her as well. She actually got a kind of present for Dane that is a medieval ring, of course, tied to his family. He has a lot of deep kind of lore and history with, like, the medieval ages and all that. And they're kind of just walking back. Sprite's pretty much getting Cersei to pretty much tell him about her being an Eternal. And then a Deviant pops up and pretty much tries to attack him and everything. And we get some kind of cool stuff with some powers and everything. Icarus pops in and pretty much takes down the Deviant a little bit, but it's able to escape. And they're like, yeah, we kind of have to get this together because the Deviants are back. Because in the 1500s, they're like, yeah, this is kind of done. They should have been wiped out, so we kind of have to check what's going on with this. And, of course, it's kind of funny because Kit Harington, who plays Dane Whitman, was Jon Snow in Game of Thrones, and Madden, who plays Icarus, was Robb Stark, and seeing them kind of like fighting over a lady named Cersei, which was the name of a character in Game of Thrones, is kind of interesting. They don't really fight, but it's like, oh, this is your previous boyfriend. Told me he was a pilot, didn't tell me he could kind of like fly and shit. So they decide to, excuse me, get everybody got together. So they're like, okay, let's go and find our leader, Ajak, and see kind of what's going on. Well, they go to South Dakota, they find her, and she's dead. It's like, what the fuck's going on? And they're all kind of heartbroken on this, and Cersei's like near her body, and then this orb, which allowed her to like communicate with the celestial Arishem, goes into her, and he says it's like it's almost time or whatnot. It's like, what the fuck? And we kind of start understanding that this emergence thing is going to occur. And we're like, alright, what's kind of all this? Now, we kind of get into that later on as we start getting everybody together. We get Kingo from Bollywood, and he learns of Ajak being killed, and being like, alright, let's kind of do this. At first, he was like, I've got all these people that I got to worry about with this film crew and everything, and his valet's like, hey man, you got to do stuff to like save the world and everything. And it's kind of cool because then he's like trying to do video footage of stuff with the Eternals and all that on this plane, and we see them kind of like explaining their powers and shit. Sprite's like, fuck off, and like using illusions and all that. Cersei's like, yeah, I could turn rocks into all this other stuff. And I really started to like connect with Cersei with that, because it's funny, again, because they change out her character from the comics of being kind of like more of a kind of schemer and all that, to being someone who's really earnest and connected with humanity on this. Now, they start figuring, okay, who are we going to go for next? Let's see. Let's get Gilgamesh and Thana, because Thana, they got together because Gilgamesh could like look after her with all the things going wrong with her memory and all that. And you're like, what's going on with this memory and stuff like that. Well, we kind of get it in a little bit here as it's pretty much explained. We pretty much get there. He's like, hey, anybody want a pie? He's like, Ajax dead. Pie go down. And you're like, oh, okay, cut a pie joke. And then we see that he then takes the pie tin and smashes it with his fist. It's just like, wow. Yeah. One, it's a great kind of, excuse me, emotional moment of like, wow, he really cared for her. And two, like his strength of what he can do. And they're just trying to figure out what to kind of do, and it's kind of cool seeing them have their own kind of family stuff going on. That Gilgamesh makes like essentially corn spit alcohol, and Kingo's like, oh god, this is disgusting. Them talking about the state of the world, like Captain Rogers retiring and Iron Man being dead, who would lead him, Icarus putting his name up for all that. And it's just kind of cool to see them working together. Fuck. Excuse me. Sprite doing this thing where she essentially made Gilgamesh look like a baby with Gilgamesh on it. Great. And they try and see what's going on. Of course, deviants had attacked Gilgamesh. He was wounded, but he was able to fend them off. Thana is kind of doing a little bit better as well. She did kind of have some kind of shit going on, but they were able to kind of get her set and everything, where Cersei is then able to kind of see what's going on. It's like, hey, maybe you're just trying too hard. And then we get pretty much an info dump of what's going on with everything with the Celestials and the Deviants and all that. Now, I do not like info dumps. However, this was pretty much the best way in this film to be able to do this. Now, there could have been a better way. There definitely was a better way. It's just, with everything kind of going on with all the characters, this stuff needed to be explained. So, Arishem pretty much tells her about the emergence, the origins of the Eternals, and the Deviants. So, what we learn is that the life cycle of the Celestials, in order for them to be born, they are seeds first, planted in planets, and then sentient life needs to pretty much give them enough energy to like get to a certain point where they will then emerge as a full-on Celestial. Earth is at that stage now. Excuse me. And that's important because in order to get sentient life, that's the important important distinction here. Sentient life. Because this kind of echoes stuff that like Galactus does, but Galactus is like, it could just have like life, like non-sentient life, and go and eat that. So I like that we're getting that kind of concept of a planetary devourer kind of thing. So the Celestials made like the Deviants. So they were pretty much like the apex predators going around, and the thing is they were like evolving and just fucking going and eating the food for the Celestials, the intelligent people. So they made artificial people, the Eternals, so they wouldn't evolve, have kids, anything like that, and just go and stop the Deviants from taking out that and making sure that Celestials can be born. It's like, holy shit. Now granted, you're going to be looking at me this is like, damn it, another Tuesday, a planet-ending thing. Yes, that is now another Tuesday for Earth. However, this is grounded into the complete purpose of these Eternals and the Deviants and what's going on. Because we got a Deviant that's like evolving pretty much and like going after the Eternals for their power and shit. Because they don't like that they've been pretty much used by the Celestials either. This one dude, Crow, pretty much the lead deviant that we see as he's like evolving and changing throughout the course of the movie. He's kind of the villain, but not really. Arishem and the Celestials are for what they're doing to various populations, and they're like, hey, we're just making more Celestials so that way they can make more life. One planet ain't no beef. It's like, yeah, it's no beef for you, because I always kind of think of how to philosophically kind of understand a certain thing. you exist in certain respects as a god to one thing, like an ant or whatnot, and an ant to something else. Act accordingly. And to the Celestials, we're just blips. We're little piddly shit that, like, powers them up and gives them life so that they can go around and spread more life and do all this kind of stuff. This is important because the Eternals have been doing this for, like, millions of years. Ajax knew about this and also told Icarus about this. We don't learn that exactly at this point, but that becomes important with the kind of conflict between the Eternals towards the third act of the movie. So, God, this gets kind of beefy, but we see their normal kind of bodies without, like, the human kind of skin, so they're kind of like synthetic kind of stuff, and that their memories are pretty much stored, and they come from this place called the World Forge, not Olympia. That's going to become important in pretty much any kind of sequels, because that's where you're going to have your Eternals rebirth. You know what I mean? They die, they have their memories kind of pretty much sequestered, and then they're brought forth again to do that shit all over again. So it'll be interesting if at some point they, like, break through and are able to utilize those memories, because we've seen if those kind of memory banks kind of get screwed up, because Thana was having visions of another emergence from another planet blowing up and all the earthquakes and everything. It's like, fucking shit. So we're like, ooh, okay, this is definitely conflict interesting. So Cersei gives the lowdown. They're like, we need to figure out how to stop the emergence. Now, granted, Icarus is sitting in the back being like, alright, let's kind of play this out. So they go to find Droog, pretty much thinking that if they're able to do something, they'll kind of be able to... well, first they go to find, like, Fastos to kind of get an understanding of, like, what they can kind of do. He, of course, is still against kind of interfering, even though he now has a husband and a kid. And I kind of actually like his family. They're actually pretty cool. His husband's pretty level-headed, and his cool's is... Excuse me, I'm sorry. His son is a pretty cool kind of little... just, cool little kid that has, like, the lines that he just delivers pretty well. And Icarus, of course, accidentally breaks his table that we see from everything going on. But, of course, the emergence is there. They got their work to do. So he's part of that. They also go to the Amazon to kind of, like, find Droog, and they want him to use his powers to put him to sleep. He's, like, pretty much controlled this place to make it as peaceful as possible. But then, of course, he's like, yeah, Ajax lying to us and everything like that, keeping all this stuff. I mean, why the fuck do you want me with this? I don't even, like, fuck it. And who knows if I can even fucking do it? But, of course, the Deviants attack. We lose another one of the Eternals, Gilgamesh, and that, of course, hurts Thana. And he, of course, is able to become, the lead Deviant, Crow, is able to become more human speech and all that like that. I'm like, yeah, fuck the Celestials. I'm going to take you guys out, and I'm going to bring it to them. However, he is the, like, least developed and pretty much gets jacked out and taken out in the third act. The main conflict is actually within the Eternals themselves. I almost would have liked the Deviants to either take in the center stage in this one, or to put them more in the background so that way they could take center stage in the next kind of installment. They're kind of just hung on and just kind of, like, fucking thunder kicked a little bit here and there, which I think they deserve better. I mean, there is some development, but again, you've got all these Eternals and everything, and you're trying to juggle everything at once. So, like, fine, let's try and do this. They find the Domo. They find Nkari that's just been getting all her shit. She's like, alright, let's try and do this. Bastos comes up with this idea to try and do a Unimind, which I know sounds fucking stupid, but it is actually a thing that the Eternals do in the comics, where they pretty much link themselves up to form a greater kind of thing, to utilize their cosmic energy, to have Droog have the power to kind of, like, put him to sleep. It's like, alright, cool, fun. This is, of course, where we start learning about the betrayal from Icarus, that he is the one that fed Ajax to... excuse me, I'm sorry. the Deviant, setting off this whole chain of events. And it was pretty much trying to stymie them into a position where the emergence would happen, it'd be done, and they would leave. We also learned that Sprite is in love with Icarus, but can't do anything with him because she's a kid, and he really shows no interest. Kingo was the one to actually be able to figure that out. But we see the kind of fault lines. Some of the Celestials, some of the Eternals want to stop the emergence, but a good amount of them don't want to stop the emergence either. It's actually a very it's an interesting concept for them to do with this of like, do we stop this or do we not stop this? And there's no kind of clear-cut answer. Now, granted, as someone who's on Earth and would potentially just be bopping and shooking around in this, I'd be like, yeah, I kind of don't want to die to a giant space god thingy. Because, one, I didn't sign up for it, and two, I didn't ask you to fucking chia pet my fucking planet, you asshole. And to set fucking thunderous apex predators to be like, hey, they're gonna eat most of the fucking things that could eat me, but hey, look at that fucking thing, and that interdimensional thing, and this shit. Fuck, man, what'd I do? But it's this kind of outside observer kind of perspective of, do we interfere, do we not interfere? I was like, yeah, I kind of like that. I wish they had dived deeper into that, but it's kind of cool. So, we see essentially a kind of Justice League versus Batman scenario in a Marvel movie. I know saying that is just kind of crazy and kind of wrong to a degree, but we got a speedster. Now, granted, we don't have like a Batman kind of person, but we've got various different kind of powered people going up against pretty much the Superman of the group, that even most of them consider him to be the strongest because of what's going on. Makari is able to find out like pretty much where the emergence point is going to happen, and they kind of set off. We see that Icarus and Sprite go on their own. Fastos, Thana, and the rest of them are able to kind of do what they do, go there. They're still trying to figure out how to do the Unimind, and Fastos is able to take the communication orb that Cersei had and create bracelets from it to kind of link them together so that way they can share their cosmic energy to try and do what they can against Tiamat, the celestial that is to be born. Now, kind of the way that it kind of happens, I'm almost thinking that they're trying to take a little bit too much stuff from the current run of the Avengers, because there's actually a dead celestial on Earth in the current Avengers that they use as Avengers Mountain. So I don't know if they're going to go that far, but we'll see. So the next bit, we essentially have CGI fight shakedown. And I can understand why people would be kind of like pissed off at this kind of third act, that this happens a lot. But I thought it was kind of interesting because we see that they attempt to do the Unimind first, but then Icarus starts going in and kind of like fucking some shit up. We see a speedster actually fucking him up, because the thing is, he does not have super speed like Superman does. But she's like wailing on him. Fastos is using his pretty much technopathy kind of skills to like fuck some shit up, as Thana was about to kind of like muck with him as well. But she kind of goes off on her little ditty to pretty much kill the lead deviant dude. As we see Icarus pretty much being taken down, we see Sprite being pretty much knocked out by Droog, and Cersei is then trying to utilize her powers more effectively because she was able to create a tree in the Amazonian jungle, which she was not able to do before. That's one of the kind of bits that I have a kind of bigger problem with, is that it does not explain why her powers suddenly shift to this kind of degree, i.e. opening from being able to change inanimate objects to being able to change animate objects, doing living augmentation of matter manipulation. That is a harder kind of thing to pull off than turning like a rock into gold or water or all that kind of stuff, changing it into that kind of different state. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But we see Icarus kind of getting pissed off and everything. We see Cersei is trying her best to take on Tiamat, but she still needs more power, and Tiamat's coming out. Icarus says that he's sorry, but we see that a Unimind forms between all the Eternals and Cersei is able to kill Tiamat. Because evidently we learn that during an emergence, the Eternals in the vicinity do link in a Unimind with the Celestial, which is kind of convenient and kind of interesting that that's able to do, but it's probably to make sure that the Eternals are able to be linked back to, like, the World Forge to be re-spun out to do the shit that they need to do. Well, by this point, we've also seen little bits and pieces of Dane Whitman. It's like, he was in the beginning, and then he was, like, talking to her. He learned, like, some weird shit about his family from his uncle as he, like, talked to Cersei over a phone thing, and then we got to see him here towards the end. But we see that the Tiamat's dead. We see that Icarus is sorry for everything that's going on, because a big kind of thing for him is, like, his detachment and his blind loyalty to the directives given to them by the Celestials and Ereshkigal. And he is so distraught over everything of, like, he did all this for this one express purpose, and he failed that. And even in failing that, he has harmed and killed people that he is considered family. And so he flies off and throws himself into the sun to kill himself. And it's like, I understand that it's like, oh yeah, the whole thing of Icarus, but in its execution, it still works out better than just being like, that's fucking stupid. It's like, god damn. Because you feel for the dude because of all those conflicting priorities, and what do you choose? Then we see that Cersei has enough cosmic power at the end to turn Sprite into a human so that way she can age and all that. Granted, she loses her immortality and her eternal powers, but I thought it was kind of convenient, but I could understand it because you need a lot of cosmic power to do anything of what they've been doing with the Unimind and killing a Celestial, so I kind of floated being like, yeah, you'd probably have enough residual energy to fucking thunder poop out on a fucking island if you kind of wanted to, so turning an Eternal into a human probably isn't that horrendous of a thing, of an ass, especially since she can manipulate fucking living matter now with what she was doing. Now, granted, she's not going to be able to go around and fucking do a lot of weird-ass shit, but, well, unless she's, like, connected in a Unimind, but, yeah, I kind of get it. Let's see. So, we then get our groups kind of, like, switched up. We got Kingo, Cersei, and Sprite, and Phastos staying on Earth. We've got Thana, Mkari, and Droog flying off in the Domo to see more of the Celestials, to pretty much tell them what's going on with them to find other Eternals, to tell them what's going on with the Celestials, to kind of see if there's a better way for this cycle. Because, I mean, excuse me, I'm sorry. There's got to be a better way than just fucking killing planets inefficiently like this. It's like, alright, I understand you're big, I understand your energy consumption levels have got to be, like, off the charts, but there's got to be a better way to fucking do this. And we see that Cersei's kind of, like, telling him all about this and all that, and he's like, wow, that's kind of freaked up. And I kind of wish you were a wizard, because he's making those jokes throughout the whole thing, asking her to, like, make him a giraffe and stuff like that. And, he's trying to tell her about all this kind of stuff, but then Ereshkigal pops up and doesn't bring up Sprite because she's no longer an Eternal. He's like, alright, you done fucked some shit up. Now, granted, paraphrasing here from me, but he's like, alright, you deemed humans worthy of saving. I'm the judge. I'm going to go through your memories and see if they are worth saving. If they're not, I'm coming back to beat ass. And they're, like, stuck and just screwed over pretty much, and then he, like, warps out into singularity, and that's the first end of the movie. Then we get into the mid-credits scene as we see that the crew on the Domo have been trying to get back to them for weeks, but haven't seen them. Earth actually even saw Ereshkigal pop up. A Celestial popping up is a big fucking deal around anywhere, and seeing that's like, now granted, on Earth is probably like, Jesus Christ, it's another Tuesday. Is that thing trying to kill us now? Because that's what we've gotten to at this point. But they're trying to figure out what's kind of going on. And then we get a pretty big surprise that I was not expecting. we see that this little dude pops up, and I'm like, who the fuck is that? Talking about how this person's coming in, and we see that it is Pip the Troll, who I've like read in like Beta Ray Bill comics that had just come out. I'm like, holy shit, it's Pip. And I'm glad seeing him kind of introduced, because he's more linked up with like Thor and all that, and that he's introducing Thanos' brother, Eros, and he actually calls him Thanos' brother here, which introduces a lot of concepts that need to be shuffled out, because, and he's played by Harry Styles. I'm like, oh, cool. I saw some weird shit floating around. I'm like, okay, that's makes sense that it would be him. They're like talking about like, you don't have to go that deep into like calling me and everything like that, but he's like, oh yeah, Airsham seems to have your guys, we're gonna have to like help you out on that kind of thing. So we got other Eternals that are into this kind of thing, and then I'm gonna have to get to some interesting kind of bits that kind of brought up. So we now have Eros and other Eternals brought up, so we gotta figure this out. Then we get to the last credit scene, and we see that Dane Whitman has found the Ebony Blade. Alright. There was an important bit as they had gotten into the Domo when they found Mkari, and then talked about, oh, is that the Ebony Blade? It's like, no, that's Excalibur. The Ebony Blade is linked to the Black Knight. It is a kind of cursed blade that if you kill more with it, you become more bloodlusty, and you just become a crazy person. Dane Whitman is able to pretty much use it in not killing people, but it is an interesting kind of reverse kind of Mjolnir kind of thing going on. It's like, oh shit. Excalibur also exists within the Marvel Comics and usually is connected with Captain Britain, magical wise, and how that goes on. So I'm like, ooh yeah, yeah. I like the teases, I just wish they had been integrated more. But he sees the Ebony Blade and is about to touch it, and somebody from off the screen says, are you sure you're ready for that, Mr. Whitman? And it's really kind of funny because I didn't know who it was, but I looked into it, and that was actually Blade. That was the first time that we had heard the new Blade for the Marvel Universe, and I'm like, all right. So we got a lot of big stuff and a lot of big movement, and it would actually make sense that Blade would be connected with that, since it's medieval fantasy supernatural kind of shit. And yeah, a lot of people would probably be like, why would you have Blade kind of linked with that stuff? Well, this dude is a knight that deals with like some crazy kind of supernatural shit, so yeah, it kind of works in that favor, especially since they call out vampires a lot. So I was like, alright, that was pretty cool. And I overall really enjoyed them like talking about these characters and the crazy kind of problems of, do we do these kind of things? Do we help these people out? Do we stop this process? And that familial kind of fighting throughout everything going on. Now, granted, the depth of how we got into certain characters needed to be worked on. The deviants might as well just have been kind of like crazy plot obstacles, rather than trying to do something with the deviant leader and kind of save that for later. Because the main villains are the Celestials, if you can kind of call that. Because it's working on this whole kind of like macro system and what that kind of entails. It was like, wow, I kind of like this kind of conflict that we got. I just wish that it had been worked in and done a little bit better. Not that it was done horribly here. So I'm just glad that we've got those kind of bigger concepts now in the MCU and what these characters represent with that. Let's see here. Let me see. So, a big part of connecting Thanos with the Eternals like this is, what the whole thing of that is how Celestials are birthed. The thing is, the whole Thanos snap would have set back the emergence because of the loss of sentient life. And then when we brought him back, that brought it back on track. Did Thanos know about the Celestials, and was his plan of utilizing the Infinity Stones any part of trying to like combat them or whatnot? Now granted, I understand that as the whole Infinity Saga and Thanos being set up as the main antagonist of that, the Celestials were mainly in the background and were not in a focused lore kind of perspective way in that. But since we are now kind of working and conjiggering and kind of configuring what's going on, we have to see if that kind of works out or shakes out. So I'm interested if that kind of does anything. Did that. I also like that there weren't any, like, jokes that were like Fat Thor in this movie. I just was like, okay, that's cool that that's not here. Now, granted, it wasn't in Shang-Chi, but I'm just glad that that's kind of didn't come in here at this moment, even though they had characters that they could have done that with, and I'm glad that they didn't. One bit in the beginning, Cersei uses her powers to kind of like save this kid during one of the emergence earthquakes, and nobody fucking like talks about it at all. Now, granted, it was this big kind of thing that they probably thought could have just turned to dust because it was fake or whatnot, but I'm just like, alright, that's kind of weird. Info dumps. And, we had a kiss between Fastos and his husband that, was pretty well done in my opinion. It wasn't completely and utterly forced. It wasn't just done for the sake of it. It just, felt kind of natural for the two characters. So, I didn't see anything wrong with that. It's like, okay, cool. No problem. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like they were just doing it to be like, here it is! It just was like, oh, there it is. We see these two characters. We see them kind of interacting. I wish there'd been a little bit more to kind of build up their relationship a little bit better. But I was fine with them. Okay. It wasn't like the sex scene that was done. It's, oh, God. That one was just, yeah. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I would definitely recommend it to anybody, really. If you're a Marvel fan, I think you'd really enjoy this one. It does have some high kind of concepts, but the jokes work out pretty well. I don't think they go too quippy with anyone. They give everybody their own kind of chance to be funny in their own way, in my opinion. Now, granted, if you see it and you disagree with that, that's cool. I could kind of see why you would think that they would probably... There is a tendency of Marvel to pretty much be like, hey, Tony Stark worked, make everybody quippy. It's like, that's not how that works. That's not how this should work, man. Stark should be a snarky, sarcastic motherfucker. Fucking Peter Parker needs to be quippy as motherfucking shit for everything on the battlefield. And then Thor just has to be bombastic as shit and tries to figure out what the fuck a cell phone is. Steve has to just be like, I gotta wrangle fucking, all these crazy people, figure out what's going on, and just hope to God I don't get blown up. And, but yeah, I really actually enjoyed it. I actually liked all the characters, pretty much. I liked all the different kind of perspectives they brought, and they all kind of added something to me, which is kind of different, because usually on ensembles they get shrunk down to such levels that it's like, I am character A, I am character B. Let us push the plot forward because the plot demands A, B, C, D. Must go and put puzzle piece A, G, C key into fucking Thunderport. Cool. I don't feel that at all. I felt that everything had, characters, which is a rare and a good thing. I like the action. It does get CGI kind of heavy and kind of fake-ish in certain instances, but not overall. Most of the action scenes are good, barring certain, kind of scenes or transitions or whatnot that's going on to me. And I'm like, yeah. And we get to see a lot of different powers in a lot of different ways, utilized coolly. So, yeah, I definitely recommend this. I can't wait to see what they do with the Eternals more, and how their kind of lore and everything kind of affects overall stories going on in the MCU. If they'll bring in some more kind of cosmic forces of Galactus, Eternity, the Living Tribunal, all these different kind of forces, how the Celestials are handling the singularities disappearing because of Thanos destroying them, and if they would need to do something about that. So, those are my opinions on the movie. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.